think we can get started. Okay. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for participating at today's panel. This is the one part of our Game Changers Collective series. My name is Jan Rosner. I'm the co-founder and CEO at One Earth Rising, and also your moderator here today. And we're talking about the dual edge of AI in the fashion evolution, stitching the future or unraveling traditions. Obviously, like a topic that's on everybody's mind right now when it comes to tech discussions, artificial intelligence. So we have an incredible panel here together to talk about different industries or different verticals in the industry and different opinions and different outlooks here. To break this down, first I wanted to just quickly highlight, I just mentioned this briefly, but there are QR codes on the walls, very nicely hidden from you, and if you are scanning them, you have the option to join our LinkedIn group and also to subscribe to our newsletter so that you get the next invitation directly in your inbox. So please go ahead, feel free and do so. Quick admin stuff. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk here 45 minutes on the panel side here amongst ourselves from 6 to 6:45-ish. And then we pass this over to you guys. So think about some nice questions that you want to ask the panelists, and then we can get the discussion going. Want to introduce and thank our partners here. First and foremost, Meet the People, one of our sponsors here, and Tim is also representative here on the panel. And then also All in All, which is a group of executive training and group assembly, group meetups. They are led by Ruben Austin. And then, most importantly here, the place that you find yourself in, beautiful private membership club, Spring Place, great partner, have been with this club forever, so a little bit biased. So I would like to introduce Susanna here to just give a little introduction and also talk about maybe some little perks for you guys. Yeah, give it a round of applause. Susanna, thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't need an applause, but thank you very much. First of all, I talk very loud and vice versa. I'm Susanna. I'm Senior Vice President of Spring Place, Beverly Hills, New York, and love to welcome all of you to Spring Place. Just by a show of hands, how many of you are here for the first time? Oh, lovely. So that means the rest of you are no strangers to Jan's panels, which are always informative, always well curated, and always very thought-provoking. A lot of our programming is kind of geared towards that. We have amazing entrepreneurs, thought leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives in a variety of industries. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Spring, the Spring Studios has been around for 25 years, and Spring Place, which is the members club, has been around since 2016 in New York and in LA since 2018. We also have a workspace, we have social activities, we have an amazing rooftop terrace, we have private offices, we have an amazing bar, which I'm sure that you will enjoy after the panel ends, and it's just an amazing community to be a part of. If you have any questions about Spring Place, or if you would like to experience Spring Place as our guest for the day, we did place on the chairs information about Spring, as well as the business card of our membership manager, Taul, who will gladly issue you a day pass to come back to Spring, bring your laptop or not, and work from the space for the day and see if it's something that you want to get involved in, because our community, which we have a wonderful representative of our community, is pretty special and they're great. So enjoy the panel, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Susanna.
Let's clap for having sunshine today.
Yay!
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And all of this is very true. I'm subscribing to that. Quick house rules. For your information, this session is being recorded. We're going to then later cut this up and then also put it on YouTube. So if you feel that's not your space, now is the chance to run out. But other than that, I appreciate you being here. So be respectful to the panelists, and please don't speak while we have the Q&A not yet in session. And then also, social sharing is encouraged. So you see under everybody's name here their social media of choice, their social media link of choice. So please do record, take pictures, share it wherever it can be shared. And then we'll also reshare that. That's a great way to get the word out. And then obviously, let's have a lot of fun. For my panelists, I would love you to be full of wisdom, And please don't monologue, so that we have a quick shot fire session here. So with that, without further ado, I want to quickly introduce my panel here. Scott Lipps, you are the partner at the Rebellion Management right now, former also previous owner of Lipps LA and One Management, and also a badass rock and roller, the drummer at Courtney Love's band, is that correct? Yes. And also, which I encourage all of you to listen to, is Lipps Service Podcast, which you address a lot of the different music and
we talk a little bit about AI on the podcast.
I love that. So that's a very great one here. So round of applause. Scott, thank you very much for joining us here.
Thanks. Nice to see you all.
Then we have Stephanie Potter. She is the Director of Sustainability at S&P Global, and also is really talking on many different fronts about sustainable fashion, and is the expert in the field here to rate and grade and give the numbers out, correct? So Stephanie, thank you very much for being on the panel. I give you all the chance here in a second to talk more about the job that you're doing. Thank you. Round of applause. Stephanie, thank you very much. And last but not least, Tim, a recurring guest. Thank you very much for being here. Founder and global CEO of Meet the People, and former serial entrepreneur, serial investor, and also a very good friend. Thank you very much. Tim, thank you for joining our panel. So, starting with you, Scott, I would love to start this whole and the kickoff to give a little insight. Everybody of you here is in some way or form involved in the fashion industry, and I would love from you to know how we got into this and how AI is involved in what you're doing right now. Scott, please.
Definitely. I guess, taking it back to, it's 2010, I think I started the first social media division in the modeling business. So back then people used to say it was cheap, it was weird, I was charging people to post a photo. And people said, what are you going to do? You're going to charge someone to post a photo on Instagram? I said, yeah, it's kind of a novel concept, but I figure it's something that hadn't been done before. It's interesting to see where it's gone now. I always say the biggest model in the world is this one is probably Kendall Jenner, and she's in fact half an influencer. So very fascinating to see where that's all gone. In terms of AI, I mean, such a scary thing for the model business. It could decimate the business. I think it reminds me of, Napster, the music business early on. I think it's about embracing technology and figuring out a way to work within it and understand it, and not, if we fight it, it's going to happen regardless, right? I think Levi's was using models recently that were all AI generated. I am trying to innovate in the business and find a way to live within it and work within it with my company. So ultimately, I think it's about just embracing the technology, and instead of being one of the companies that fight it, just figure out how to use it and utilize what's happening. And it's scary. I mean, no question. Model agencies can be done in 3 years. And if we don't find a way to live within it and work within it, it could mean the end of what I do. So,
in that sense, how is the Rebellion Management different to other agencies? You're here for the long run, I read. Right?
Yeah, I mean, we work with a lot of celebrities for branding, a ton of influencers, and I think we work on a lot of product development with our clients. We don't just book models. We try and innovate. We work with a ton of celebrities on branding. I've always liked the aspect of branding versus just booking models. I think building brands is very interesting. Early on, I worked with people like A$AP Rocky, Naomi Campbell, Claudia Schiffer, building brands. So that, for me, has always been something way more interesting than just booking a model.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. Stephanie, the first time when we got introduced, I was struggling a little bit how Standard & Poor's would be the right fit here. And then we had a conversation. It was actually really mind-blowing what you're working on. So give us a little insights how AI and also, what you do in the sustainability field in S&P Global, and how an AI can be involved there.
Yeah, thank you. So I work at Standard & Poor. We're a credit rating index. We're a financial company. And about 6 months ago, I started to get into sustainable fashion, really. So my focus has been, since 2016, on integrating sustainability-based analytics into financial decision-making. That's what I care about. That's what I live and breathe. So more recently, I discovered that there's actually a lot of a lot of influence in fashion, much more than in oil and gas and energy transition and the things that I talk about most days. And in addition to this, there are a huge amount of human rights problems. I mean, very, very big supply chain problems that we have seen since the 1960s. Digging into these issues have been some of the most motivating and compelling ideas that I've really had the honor to kind of hold on to for the last 6 months or so. And so long story short, I've collated a number of people very high in fashion and finance and in politics, and I've begun to escalate a lot of these issues around pay transparency in the supply chain, especially. So about a week ago, United Nations General Assembly event, we discussed these issues more broadly, and a number of the senior leaders at my company started to get involved as well. So for me, I would say to be clear, most of my history and my experience is in climate and finance, and sustainability and finance, and most recently jumping into the fashion space as a long-term lover of fashion, may I add, but also as someone who very, very clearly sees that there are huge sustainability issues here that we need to highlight. And the way AI comes into that is the same way that any kind of efficiency or transparency or enhanced technology needs to come in to any badly positioned situation is a way to fix a current humanitarian crisis. So that's how I would position it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Tim, Meet the People provides a safe haven, a family basically for different agencies around the world, right? So you're providing infrastructure, and so you're getting a lot of insights of different agencies' work with different brands. How would you see AI being like part of your work right now? Where do you see it trickle in? What is the part that fascinates you maybe the most?
Well, besides the fact that it's obviously the topic of the year and probably going to stay around, we do see that every industry is affected, no matter if it's fashion or I today had a lunch with IBM, who invented AI 20 years ago with Watson, and even they think about how that's going to affect their business, right, going forward. But as this is about fashion, we discuss it a lot with our clients from the fashion industry and lifestyle industry. And you mentioned models. It touches everything. It touches the process, how you design, how you decide on patterns in the future, because everything globally is available to you with a few fingertips, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, specifically also on this topic, as everything is globally available, recurring visitors or attendees here of our show know that we would like to always break down these issues, specifically when it comes to more complicated topics like Web3 or AI. So I would, first and foremost, also for the Q&A section, nothing is off topic, so there's no dumb questions, just stupid answers. So please be encouraged also to break down these barriers. I want you to ask questions to understand the topic. And so I would love to hear from you guys also, what is something that you came across that you can debunk, like a thing that people commonly believe about AI? This is absolutely not true. It can be a positive or a negative thing.
I would say that one of the issues that's coming up a lot already is copyright, right? Because ultimately, you see these models that are generated by AI, like whose faces do they belong to? And ultimately, are people going to sue them because they're using someone's nose and ears? And who's where are they ultimately pulling from? So that's something that I think that will definitely come up in the future. We're just touching on it. It's moving so quickly, as I've mentioned. I mean, every day there's a new article, there's something else that's going on. So I think, again, it's like trying to catch up with the technology and where we're sitting in culture it's going to be interesting. And especially for agencies like mine, we have to be ahead of it, because before you know it, it can change the entire industry within months. So.
Oh yeah, 100%. Stephanie, is there anything on the sustainable side that you do you want a moment? Do you want to think another moment?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Tim.
Well, I think that people believe that AI is globally accessible because we can all use ChatGPT and OpenAI to make our life a little easier. But the reality is, and that's what I want to debunk today, every large corporation thinks about their isolated large language models right now. And they're going to be behind the firewall of their corporations. So maybe an interesting fact, 20% of all data is publicly accessible. 80% is behind firewalls. And think about the fact that AI is not just one brain. It's going to be thousands of brains that are owned by corporations and fed with information by individual corporations. Right now, we're all feeding ChatGPT with every question we ask, so it becomes intelligent, more informed, a bigger database. But the reality is we're going to have thousands of, if not hundreds of thousands of these AIs that are going to operate on the basis of what you feed them. And that's what I want people to think about. What you feed the AI is how it's going to react to your questions in the future.
Thank you. Stephanie?
Yeah, I mean, so lightly I would kind of add on to that and say, perhaps AI is not, we shouldn't see it in like an individual silo, but more so in a longer continuum of collating wealth. Like, so for example, in the 1960s, the average CEO made about $1 million. That's about 20 times the average worker. Today, average CEO makes about 17 million. That's over 300 times the average worker, and most of the manufacturing is offshored. So just as I was mentioned, you know, these AI algorithms and their outputs are largely held by corporations and other constituencies. It's important, I think, to see it within a broader movement of influence and power.
It's not a public good, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I wish it was. Yeah.
It's not yet, yeah. I mean, so from our own perspective, just to plug in what we are working on quickly. So Wonders Rising is a video game developer slash provider of infrastructure for game development. So really teaching or building tools in AI is something that we are using for the future of whatever you want to call the next metaverse or interoperability. However, I wanted to highlight also everything that I heard here also highlights the fact, and that it's very important to understand that AI can be many things, from the little chatbot on a website up to like the Terminator that wants to kill you and has no remorse. So all of these things are true, some of them a little bit less than the others. However, there's really a lot of different applications that AI can be helpful for and also be a challenge to be used in the future. So on that note, I would love to talk now more about the fashion industry, which here is the topic today. So in that regard, you mentioned this earlier a little bit, Scott, here in regards to the fashion world on the side of the models. How is the biggest threat perceived coming from AI, or what do you see as the biggest threat?
I mean, again, this could completely wipe out agencies as we know it, right? I think you see all the use, you know, AI is being used for photography, it's being used Levi's just used AI, and I think there's interesting, if you read the comments, when the models were used, I think the Wall Street Journal just did something on this whole thing. I mean, it's interesting, people are not really loving what they see. I think the most challenging thing from what I understand is really duplicating the clothes for some of the companies that I've met with. I think there's a company called Soul Machines that's doing some really interesting work. They're replicating, you can have conversations with Bruce Willis or whoever it may be, like in real time. I do think there's some really interesting practical uses of it. But again, I think for the fashion business, so like you don't want to put the entire business out of work, right? So how do we live within it? I always take this back to pop culture, but I spoke a little bit about Napster, and if you think about Napster early on, and I always take it back to music, you know, Napster was something that every band fought early on, and then eventually became the streaming services. Like, so how do we learn to live with this and take the good elements of it and apply it to what we're doing? It is very scary for agencies, because I think ultimately if people figure this out, maybe they won't need, you know, agencies like mine in the future, but I'm hoping that we find a way to live within it.
I think it's this. We talked about this earlier a little bit. In this very building, we had the first ever fashion show, AI fashion show, right?
I wasn't there, but how was it?
I don't think it was. I mean, it was perceived in the press. It was perceived very well, but I think like attendee-wise, etc. So it's
It was
like
the first one.
it was.
Come on, give
Yeah,
them a
of course, of
break.
course, of course. I'm not like
I didn't see. So
dissing
what
it.
was it exactly? What was
It was just
happening?
like creations of designers that
Okay.
purely used AI, and
Right.
also like all the models that had it there, they were also all AI generated. It was all on screens, right? And so it was much better than the first metaverse. I give it that. It was way better than that.
But also, from what I read, a lot of the submitters, so I think there were about 300 people who submitted this AI-generated fashion work. Most of them weren't top designers. So it's a way to democratize the fashion industry that, is pretty cool.
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. Actually, okay, let's stay on this one, because democratizing the fashion industry means also there might be an opening to more fashion being produced. How is AI playing a role in actually creating harm, environmental harm for the world, obviously, but through the use of AI, through applying this to fast fashion, for example? This is for you, Stephanie.
Okay, yeah. So I can take that, and so I want to kind of comment on some of the dangers to influencers and to creatives in the space as well. So, one thing that I see is AI is affecting two really big verticals of fashion. So one is a trend forecasting, and the way that trend forecasting creates the innovations for large brands, and then two is the way that those styles are marketed and executed on. So on the first half with the trend forecasting, for example, there is a company, perfect example of this. It's called Curatech. So Curatech was founded in 2013 by two machine learning PhDs, and their claim to fame is to create a list of top influencers. So number one, the most manual process is you're creating this list of influencers. Number two, and most uniquely, they have a vision algorithm which essentially looks at over 3,000 different variables to each picture that these influencers are providing, which is insane. I mean, I don't think I could label 100 things from one single picture, but it's taking the texture of the clothing, it's taking the style, it's taking everything. And then step three is to upload those trend forecasts to a platform for large brands to buy. And some of their largest buyers are New Balance, Prada, Louis Vuitton, Moncler, and the creative designer of New Balance actually said, we're using trend forecasting for 80% of our products. 80% of our innovations are coming from things that they're ripping from your influencers. You know what I mean? I mean, that's insane. Yeah. So only 20% is actually being leveraged for their creatives, and you can read this on their website. It's public information, but it's an example of how quick companies will be to jump on trend forecasting, which is a huge part of AI, I think, and commercialize it. And it is really going to hurt people who are creatives and are essentially in the middle class, I think. And that needs to be a top priority for the way we talk about AI. Because ultimately what that's doing is just siphoning ideas from the internet and branding them. So it's just like smart rich people selling things to everyone else. It's just, yeah, I'll stop there.
It's definitely given in what you said earlier, also in the support of using blockchain for validation. So specifically becoming more available to everybody, right? So this is nothing now where only big companies can afford that. This is something that becomes a commodity very soon.
Well, then and to jump in there, that has been around for probably 30 years. So I can't disclose the name, but I was asked to judge an M&A process on a fashion research trend prediction company by a very large private equity firm, and they wanted my input on AI, on how it's going to change the business model. And they've been doing this for 30 years, and their largest clients are Zara, H&M, Prada. So they buy licenses for hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to actually have people in fashion shows scrape images and understand what the next trend is, so they can copy it and put it into your fast fashion shelf, basically. So that stuff has existed forever. So, but the entry barrier is really high. Like a normal designer who wants to break through the internet, the liberalization of social media, would never get access to what color, what pattern. Like, there is one aspect of it's going to be easier to steal ideas. The other aspect is it's going to liberate and allow designers to maybe pick up on a trend that's going to come next season, because they get access through asking AI the same thing these people pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for, right? So there's two sides to it, to an extent, but in the end, it's an IP problem. Because if you can scrape any design, any color, anything from anywhere at any time, and who owns that intellectual property on it, right?
And before I wanted to continue on this question, I want a quick sign of hands here. Who thinks that AI needs to be regulated more? Well, I would say that's the majority. So on that note, what you just addressed here is there's definitely also an issue around data privacy, IP rights, etc., and so forth. Just out of from the point of view of agencies, is that a topic that's been discussed?
Yeah, of course, because I mean so my business model is pretty simple, right? I employ people, so I buy hours and I sell them on a premium to a client who needs the hours, technically, right? So I'm simplifying and making my business model super boring, but that's technically what you do. The problem is, if now AI does 80% of the job, what am I going to charge for? And the other problem is, if I work for LVMH, right, and charge them a ton of money for coming up with a campaign or creative, who owns the IP if I do 80% of the job with AI or 100%? So my main issue is, if more of my people use AI, I actually don't own the IP I'm selling to the client, because Elon Musk's going to own it, or Microsoft's going to own it. So that's why, in the end, as I said before, corporations going to own their own brain, because then they own the IP, even though it's based on the platform they kind of license. And that's going to be the business model. Like, large corporations going to license ChatGPT and basically feed it with their own data and make it their own brain so they can sell an IP.
I was going to say, talking about intellectual property, did anybody hear the Ghostwriter song, the mashup of Drake and The Weeknd, that was almost nominated for a Grammy? How crazy is that? It was an AI-generated song. So where is that going, right? Ultimately, I think that if you compensate artists, if it sounds exactly like Drake and The Weeknd and they get compensated, that's interesting to those artists. But if no one gets, and I don't even know how they feel about that. I would imagine they're either flattered or they're horrified. But it was almost nominated for a Grammy, which is crazy when you think about it.
It's insane. I mean, the abilities now to reproduce or just create songs, create any sort of entertainment, and reproduce actually the likenesses of existing people. I mean, we definitely need some regulation there. But I want to take it a little bit on the bright side here, to the bright side a little bit more. Before we talk about the positive effects of AI, I would also like to ask you, Scott, on that note, in regards to AI, do you see working with different brands, working with different also partners, democratization of the actual, like, the accessibility to fashion and for designers? Is there a little bit more a way to create more easier and now make it accessible more and not to keep it just for the big ones?
I think it's too early. Like I said, the technology is moving so quick that I think we're just beginning to figure out how to implement it into our business. So for what I do, it's something that I eventually want to pitch to brands. How do we work within this space with our talent? Again, like I just always revert back to pop culture. Like, I love there's a J-Lo ad that she did for Virgin Voyages where there's an AI likeness of her in ad. And when I watch it, is that her or is it just an AI version of her? So how do you apply that to what I'm doing and what we're doing representing talent? Again, it's like coexisting is really important. So I don't necessarily want to fight it, and I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but it's early, so we're just trying to figure out how to apply to what we do to what's happening with what's going on in such a fast-moving space.
Yep, that helps. I want to see a show of hands again. So, in regards to the certain or now developments, it doesn't matter where you stand in like the knowledge level. So, are you excited about what's happening with AI? A show of hands, please. And who's a little bit, even in a good conscious way, scared of it? It's always the same amount of
The Terminator, right?
Terminator.
Yeah.
Terminator is going to come at some point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, then let's take it into the future. So, lady, gentlemen, Stephanie, where do you see AI in the fashion world, specifically when it comes to sustainability here? Where do you see it in 5 years from now?
I mean, that's a really hard question. I think it really depends. I think that if the past is anything like the future, there is a large risk that things are going to get worse for human rights. So, about 60 years ago, Levi's manufactured jeans in the United States, and we fought to ensure that people who were working as garment workers had a livable wage, human rights were respected, and through the last 60 years, we've seen everything offshore. 98% of clothing that Americans wear today is made overseas, compared to 5% in the 1960s. So we have to really take into consideration the amount of change that has happened behind the scenes with globalization, because that's so important when it comes to what do we want to do with AI. It's just like holding like a knife. Like, what am I going to do with this knife? Am I going to stab myself in the stomach, or am I going to cut a carrot? So I don't think right now we're going in the right direction, to be honest. And I think the reason for that is because we're not respecting union workers as much as we should. There is a huge constituency of wealth that's trending, especially in the way that CEOs are paid. So there are indicators in our economy that are showing us that there is more focus that should be placed on common human dignity, no matter if that is in the US or if that is overseas. And technology provides a way to be transparent about that, but people actually have to care. Like, do you care if the garment that you wore was made by a child? Do you care that factories with, the most popular shoe brands require a pregnancy test and extreme hours for anyone who works there in Bangladesh or Thailand? We don't think about it because there's no transparency around it, but there could be.
Is there a way to use AI to actually confirm or check on supply chains, or bring this into a whole way of check and balances?
Yes. Certainly. There probably has been a way for that for a long time, but we have to want it and we have to ask for it. And in a free market economy like the US, we don't get smart regulations like in Europe. So we do have to stand up and say, actually, it's not really cool that a 6-year-old made my shoes, or that, the person that made my jeans actually wasn't making a livable wage and is going between factory work and sex work. That's the problem. The problems that really happen when we allow these large brands to become only branding and not manufacturing.
I could see a label system here, similar to what they tried with the traffic light system for the food. Red means like, oh, sex work was involved. It's like, okay, don't buy that, or something like that, right? Child trafficking, yeah. all the bad things that you can think of when it comes to labor, that could then be flagged automatically by an AI checking down on the supply chain.
And yep. Lastly, just one more thing. A lot of these problems have been exacerbated since the pandemic. So there are so many garment workers that have been experiencing huge amounts of pay discrimination, sexual harassment, large claims that have have really become a much louder voice since the pandemic because large brands just didn't pay them. They decided, you know what, we can't fulfill the orders anymore. See you later, alligator.
Tim, on the agency side, what do you see the development, and where do you see the agencies? What are they working, regulations aside, working most on and being most excited about in 5 years?
Well, that was hard. So I think, talking about my industry, I think people are scared about their jobs, right? Because if you think about writing any content or like taglines, any creative work, technically can be disrupted by AI, right? And it's not related to fashion. It's kind of related to all industries, all products. I think when we told kids to go into engineering 10 years ago, because everybody needs coders and people who can produce something on the internet, that's going to change, right? Because now you need architects. And it's kind of the same in my industry. I think 5 years down, we don't need people to do research. We don't need people to produce content anymore because it's all going to be AI. But we need architects for ideas, architects for brands, architects who understand how should a new strategy translate. That's not the same shit you just fed AI before, right? So that's going to be the way how, again, and education has always been, a shit show because kids still read books from the 60s about history and math and all, and the internet is here already where you get more information on Wikipedia than you can get in a book. So that's going to have to change the way how people think about their job. And I worry a lot about especially people who enter into jobs, because when you come out of college, you usually do a shitty job, right? If you have a job that relates to your hands and your physical skills, you're gonna probably be around. But if it's a job about your brain, where you a lot of people do analysis, research, they do the hard labor stuff that senior people don't want to do. That job doesn't exist anymore. So we're gonna expect people to have, as we already do, 5 years job experience in something they actually never had the opportunity to learn post-pandemic because they couldn't learn it in the pandemic. So it's gonna accelerate. So I'm worried about the next generation of people we are gonna have massive expectations on that they're not gonna be able to fulfill.
I was gonna say to that, it's scary to think about creatives, right? People that play music, people that write TV and film, where's that gonna be in 5 or 10 years? Because ultimately that's what I grew up playing music. I don't even know, you don't need to do that anymore. It's people just use AI and we'll see where that goes. So it's all scary where it's going, but again, I think it's about like figuring out a way to live with it, and work within it.
Where do you see, to ask you the same question, in 5 years, where do you see the, model entertainment industry going? And I'll ask a specific question also about like the actual labor.
I was going to say the writer's strike too, right? A lot of that, a lot of the strike was about the writers and using AI writers versus humans to write TV and film. So again, I think they came up with a solution. I think they've decided that humans should be writing TV and film for now until some other notice. But I have no idea. It's such a scary time, but it's an exciting time, and where is it going to be? I wish I had the answers. But I do feel like, it's a time to really explore and figure out a way to, how do we embrace it? How do we...
But do we have a chance to stop it? I don't think so.
No,
the next union strike,
so. The genie's out of the bottle.
It's a blimp, and the writers got whatever they wanted right now, but honestly, that's what the print press said about the internet in the 90s. So it's not stoppable. So the question is, as a business, as a person, somebody who wants to build a career, how do you adapt to it? And as a business, how do you adapt to it? The reality is you're going to have 50% AI models.
I was going to say, I think
right?
of AI agencies in the future.
Same thing.
I won't be sitting here. My AI version of myself will be here in 3 years doing this panel, right? So
that leads me into an interesting question, because I always want, also here for our panel, we would love to have the people take something away and really apply to, like for all the models, the designers, the architects of the next fashion shows, or also agency workers. So there's a nice quote I want to hear push out by Prof G, Scott Galloway, It's like, it's not AI taking your job. It's the person who knows AI that's going to take your job. So from each of your verticals, what is it that you would recommend to anyone that listens? What should they do now to be prepared for the future? Scott.
I would say take some classes, soak it all in, figure out how it applies to your business, and don't fight it, because again, look at Napster. That didn't really make it, but Spotify did. So how do you apply what's happening now to your business, and how do you grow with that? Because like you said, it's going to happen regardless. So my company in 5 years might be an AI agency, but I'm not going to be left, behind. I'm going to figure it out, and I think it's important to do that.
So, I mean, my angle is always that technology needs to have a goal. It can't just be efficiency. And ultimately, that is human rights. That's human dignity. So being comfortable with that conversation, reading philosophy related to the history of human rights, very important for these conversations.
Well,
Tim?
I can only speak for what I see as everybody. So AI is going to be better because they're going to see everything. But like when I see my 15-year-old teenage daughter do her homework, and these kids blend AI as a tool into everything they do already. So that's the future. That's what I was when I was probably 18 with the internet, right? So it's, as I said, it's unstoppable. So adapting to it, making it a habit to learn to use, is going to secure your life and your job and your business. If you don't do it, next generation going to replace you, just like we replaced a lot of people.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I like the combination here, actually, to go back to real, true, valuable, or human values, right? To really foster and embrace good human values, to teach this to your kids, whoever has kids here, and then at the same time really be on top of things, really learn about the technologies as they come. They're not going to go away. They're here to stay, 100%. I mean, somebody has to really do some work to convince me otherwise. And I would definitely say anyone who has any pull and power to just help, maybe give ChatGPT to Senate, to Congress, so that they can do their job faster, so that we can get some legislation in there. Yeah, well, that would be something. So we have a tradition on the show where I would give my panelists the challenge to come up with like a one-sentence takeaway, so that anyone who's in here, if you just had this one opportunity to listen to one sentence, this is what my panelists would like you to take away today. And whoever wants to go first can take it. There's nobody else down there.
So garment workers. Like, garment workers are the people making the clothes oftentimes. And so think about who those people are. Are they underpaid, underappreciated people in other parts of the world? Or are they... Or are you giving your dollars or voting with your dollars for someone who's an artisan that lives close to you, who is making a livable wage, who has dignity in their lifestyle?
Yep. There we go. Yep. Please give it up.
I would say educate yourself and use technology to innovate in your specific field that you're in. So,
very nice. Wonderful. Tim?
Well, same thing, embrace it, because every generation has gone through change. This is just next generation's change. So embrace it, learn, and don't fight it. And government is going to try to regulate it, but they have done a shitty job on many other things before. And so don't hope for regulation. It needs regulation, but don't hope for the government to save your job. That's BS.
Run for office. Here you go.
I would say vote correctly, but what's the choice right now?
Well, it's my recommendation 100% here, the embracement. I was just listening to another podcast recently, and it was so fun to be reminded that there was such an uproar in society when for the first time books were pressed and everybody had access to books. This is the demise of society. Everybody will be distracted. Now everybody can read. This is horrible. And this got repeated every time and every time. I think AI is a little bit different. A book cannot just decide to kill everyone. However, there is definitely very much truth in that, to embrace the technologies that are coming at us. We can't really fight them off anyways, and be on top of
Think about the positive. Like, imagine, I mean, we probably all went to school here. Some of us, most of us, probably went to college, whatever. All that is technically unnecessary, right? And we know this for an extent, especially in the US, where it's just money making. But in reality, like, you could technically today already educate yourself on a topic without ever having attended a class. Like, people actually make their SATs without ever going to class, right? So AI is going to accelerate that, and you do not need, like, I remember this distinctly when I was looking at schools in New York City, and one of the headmasters told me, well, it's not about learning something and retaining the knowledge. Today, we teach kids where to find the information, right? And AI is going to be, we teach us, the next generation, the kids, how to feed a program to extract exactly what they want. So it's just a change of behavior, but it's going to fast forward a lot of things that the internet already fast forwarded for the last generation. That's how I look at it. So it's going to free up a lot of time, because a lot of the grunt work is going to be taken away, and you can actually start thinking instead of grunt working.
100% more time for reading, which leads me to the next question before we go to Q&A. And think about your questions. And this fine young gentleman, Bronson here, also our very own COO of One Earth Rising, will hand you a microphone as soon as we get into the Q&A section. So I also asked my panelists to present or recommend a book, a podcast, a blog post, whatever it is that they recommend as a knowledge transfer, where they should start, where you should start looking into whatever it is. It can be business related, life related, or topic related. So mine is Learning Machines 101 podcast. It is what it is. It's really giving you an introspective of the very basics of machine learning, of AI, of long language models. And yeah, check it out. That's my recommendation. Scott.
The New York Times does a great podcast called Popcast. They also do The Daily, which you might listen to. So I recommend the Popcast about AI in the music industry.
And of course, lip service.
My own, I guess.
There you go.
Can I do that? Is that
Of
allowed?
course.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to plug it for you. Stephanie.
So I just finished this fantastic book. It's called Unraveled by Maxine Badat. And she's actually the lawyer and the writer of the Sustainable Fashion Act that's it's pending right now in New York. This is the most amazing piece of investigative journalism. Like, if you really want to know what it takes to make a garment in this day and age and the history of fashion, this is phenomenal. Like, really phenomenal. This will make you think twice about, like, everything that you're buying. It's really changed my life for the better. But it's also just, it's from someone who loves the fashion industry, which is very different than just getting this criticism from outside, from like environmentalists and things like this. So yeah.
I love this. You're officially the first person who actually brought their favorite book.
Brought it.
So wonderful. I love that.
What's a book?
If someone wants to borrow it, you can borrow it.
By the way, everything of this, so that's another plug here for scanning the QR codes on the walls, because then you can become a member of our LinkedIn group and also sign up for the newsletter. Then you will receive the follow-up email also with the recommendation. Tim.
Well, so two things. Number one, we talked about AI. So I think there's a lot of misconception of the opportunity and the fear, right? So what was really helpful for me was to watch on YouTube AI Dilemma, the video about like actually explaining what large language models are, and so I highly recommend that video if you haven't seen it already. And then, of course, I mean, I'm going to launch a podcast as well. I haven't even told you about this, called Meet the Voice.
Oh, wow.
And it's going to be, again, leaders talking about trends and the technology and advertising industry. So you should follow that. It's not out yet, but it's going to be on Game Changers LinkedIn. So scan the code.
Wonderful. I love it. Just as a little kind of trip to memory lane, Tim, myself, and another friend, we also hosted multiple Clubhouse rooms, actually.
Clubhouse, wow.
Yes, good on whoever knows Clubhouse, who remembers that. So we had a good time there talking about. And we had Sir Martin Sorrell on the show. It was, quite a name.
Remember Clubhouse?
Yeah, don't
Yeah,
really.
it's still there.
It is somewhere still there. All right, perfect. Thank you very much indeed. I think this is going to hear a round of applause. Thank you so much for this part already. Thank you guys. Thank you all for coming out. And yeah, would love to hear some hands and see some questions. So let's get it on. Anyone, some question over there? Here we go and start it. Thank you, Bronson.
Should I stand up?
Yeah, would be lovely.
Thanks very much for the panel. This was really thought-provoking. I think there's sort of two ways to think about a lot of the things you guys have discussed. There's looking at artificial intelligence horizontally, and you think about things like supply chain management, supply chain optimization. I think it's worth setting that aside because, one, I think that cuts across all industries, and also I don't think there's a feasible way to stop that. But if you think about the fashion industry vertically, I think the slightly more visceral angle is about the consumer-facing aspects of AI. And I'd love to know your thoughts on the idea that maybe all AI does is just create another vertical of products that already exist. And Stephanie, to think about your example with manufacturing, like it's true that there are people who use machines to make products from start to finish. There's also Loro Piana and Brunello Cucinelli, and everything's handmade, and all it does is create choice and leave that to consumers to either back brands, companies, or individuals that use AI heavily in the way they design and produce goods, or leave other people to opt out. And maybe the impact of AI isn't some sort of sledgehammer to the industry and really just another vertical aside it.
Stephanie, you want to answer directly?
I mean, such a brilliant question. I mean, I'm hoping I'm answering it properly. I suppose it would just be like that the AI outputs are just what they're collecting, right? So, for example, when I mentioned the Huratech example, which I think is a phenomenal example of how democratized the trend forecasting is becoming. But what if you put the designs of underprivileged leaders in fashion in those algorithms? What if you fed those algorithms things that were had a goal of being something different and of promoting social equality? That's the way I would think about it. I hope that answers it properly, but I'm not sure if anyone else has something else.
Gentlemen, would you like to chime in?
Well, exactly. AI only knows what you feed it. And the more we feed it things we ethically believe in are the right way to go for humanity, that's what we're going to get out. So think of it like it doesn't, number one, it doesn't have a self-conscious yet. It's going to get there. Number two, it doesn't judge right or wrong. That's the main problem of machines. That's why movies like Terminator exist, right? You give them something, they're going to execute against it. That's the whole point. So if everybody uploads horror movies to AI, we're going to have a pretty bad world. But if everybody tries to think about like how can I actually upload some stuff or share stuff or create stuff that's ethically more valuable, then we're going to get a very different outcome. I think looking at it that way is going to help people maybe think of the use of AI in a more positive way. But you said that.
Yeah. Our dreams create our reality, right? So we have to make sure that we're dreaming in a socially responsible way.
Lilo from the Fifth Element was shown love and everything was okay. So there we go. Thank you very much for the question. Another hand was up here. Oh, sorry. Afterwards, then you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the wonderful discussion. I lead a machine learning and AI team at JP Morgan, so quite involved in the whole field and actually understand how it actually works. So I wanted to say +1 to many of the points that you guys made, that the way to deal with AI is to actually understand it and learn it, because people tend to fear what they do not understand. And the good news actually is that the underlying math behind many of the AI models is actually not that complex. And anyone who has like high school to college level math knowledge, understands basic calculus, can actually understand how these models work. So it's not some crazy math or some crazy new innovation. It's actually mostly a lot of data and a lot of compute that became recently available. And the other point is that it is also commonly believed that the AI technology is locked down by big tech companies and that it's like not accessible to common people, but that's also not true. And a lot of the large language models are actually now being open sourced by companies like Facebook. There's another company, Mistral.ai, that just released a new model that actually beats many of the super large language models on most of the benchmarks. And anyone in this room can actually deploy these models on a home laptop. So it's not so much lack of accessibility or lack of data, but it's lack of knowledge and understanding. And I think if we all took the time to actually understand how AI works, we'll fear it less, because people tend to fear what they do not understand. So.
Thank you so much for this contribution. This basically highlights the exact purpose of this panel also. And you made a really good point, because the big difference and why there is such a misunderstanding is the difference between the collection of data and being a sentient being, right? So making decisions. And right now, luckily, knock on wood, the AI models are not there yet to be sentient and making their own decisions. They're just executing, to your point, and collecting the data there. Thank you. Did you have also a question?
No. Well, if it's okay, I'll just make one
great
point
contribution.
about
Thank you.
Sentience. You mentioned sentience. So one fundamental aspect of sentience is causation. So we human beings have an ability to understand the difference between correlation and causation. So we understand when two things are merely correlated versus when one causes the other. Whereas AI models, as they stand today, they simply discover patterns in data. They have no understanding of causation, and no one actually knows how to solve that problem. So no one actually knows how to even define sentience, and no one that I know of is actually working on making AI models sentient. So, anyhow,
very good. And when they do, don't let them talk to Boston
Brilliant.
Robotics. Lady here in the front.
Yep.
Thank you for the contribution. This was really good. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your discussions tonight. So I work in the retail industry, and I mean, you say all these jobs, as manufacturing is being outsourced and offshored, it's because it's just so much cheaper, and now these massive companies are having much larger profit margins. So I wonder how you can really use AI to make these sustainability initiatives profitable and convince these massive corporations that they should be sustainable, and showing them what the financial incentive is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Very good question. Whoever wants to jump, I mean, Stephanie, this is made for you, but everybody else?
This is such a $1 million question. I mean, it's not one that I'm going to answer today as eloquently as I wish I could, but it is very simply an entire process that capitalism has to evolve to integrate positive and negative externalities of companies. Like, we cannot have companies that are making more than countries in this world who produce social externalities that cost the rest of us years and years, and environmental damage that is not being priced in to their products. So it's such an important question. I wish I could answer it more directly, but I think that it is it's very much about the process that we are in right now to preserve capitalism, which is this ability to price in externalities. And what that really means is enhanced transparency, especially for large corporations, and an understanding of how corporations affect the society around them, their stakeholders. So in sustainable capitalism, there's this kind of dualism between stakeholder and shareholder capitalism, stakeholder being all the people who are affected by the company, shareholders being just the shareholders of the company. Those shareholders could be people in other countries who have absolutely no interest in the welfare of the people who are at stake with the company's externalities. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah.
I know that was a bit of jargon, but long story short, I think that it's a necessary pricing in of social externalities that we're in the process of, I think.
I wanted to ask you a question.
Yes, thanks.
but we're not going to change capitalism in this country. Like, no, we're not going to. Come on.
We already are.
It's been around for a while. So, but isn't it in S&P's power to do exactly that? And I'm happy you're here because but because ultimately why capitalism exists is because people want to make money. If the pain is they're going to make less money if the businesses they invest into are not sustainable, so it becomes a line item on the P&L how sustainable you are.
Sustainability is not a line item.
No, but what I'm saying is like if S&P would make it a requirement,
Need to change
then
the
the
rating
share
system.
price is gonna differentiate from what it is today. So I'm happy you're here because you can change it. I can't change it, but you can.
So it is.
How do you make sustainability a line item?
That's right.
Yes, but
That's
Great question.
it is the question, and it's about the beauty and the magic of the integrated reporting movement. And what that really means, the integrated reporting movement, we're going to talk about accounting standards. It means that we are looking, so every company has what we call materiality. And materiality are those things that are important beyond the financial accounting. So if you're a whiskey company, you produce whiskey, and you use this very pure water from Ohio that you've been making your whiskey for 20 years, but actually this water reserve is at risk. But you have no accounting standards for pricing in the fact that your water reserve might be dwindling in the next 5 years. So the idea here is that, and this is a very broad movement, I can send you information on the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board. It's a part of global accounting. It is that each industry must come to the conclusion of what is important outside of the financial metrics that we have now. And many companies, many countries, and especially Europe, are quite far ahead in the way that we are pushing companies to disclose on material externalities that will be just as important as their financials in the future, just as important as their financials. So it's not that this is going to happen, it's happening right now, and it's a huge part of this brilliant question that you asked around, like how do we actually make this work? We've got to price in the negative things.
It is a great question, and actually, 1 second, Rashmi. There is I can tell you exactly how this is going to go. You're going to use AI to really properly highlight and follow up the supply chain. Scott is then going to use AI to properly validate the IP and associate it with the product, and then Tim is going to use AI to run the best advertising agency campaigns to get in front of the clients, the customers.
With a bow.
Wonderful. Great question. Thank you very much. This is definitely a loaded one. Here we go. So we have another question here. Oh, sorry, Rashmi.
No, I want to ask what's the agency that's
1 second. Use the microphone because
I feel like
use the
a lot
microphone,
of good
Rashmi.
intentions, but there's no one agency or one place that we can go and see what are the rules that's evolving. I also believe we are going from the world of capitalism to more socialistic, care more about people, environment, because we're seeing how the climate is changing, the fact that I can't breathe when I go outside because some big multinational companies try to kill, green energy. It's just we as youth are realizing this is not sustainable anymore for our future. So I also see a lot of grassroots movements of youth running for office. Yeah. So I do think that's already there in our awareness, general awareness, but I don't see well-intentioned people. Where can we go and find this one set of rules that is going to make everybody accountable? So what you can't measure, you can't change, right?
What you can't measure, you can't manage. So we have in the U.S. we have these gap accounting principles. But everywhere else in the world almost has IFRS. And so the IFRS is an accounting standards board, and they have the ISSB. The ISSB stands for the International Sustainability Standards Board. And this is like the mover and the shaker of how we can think about industry level we call it materiality, which is all of those things that a company should be transparent on, even if they're not directly the finances. So if you're a retail and apparel brand, the iFirst Foundation will say, you need to report on your supply chain because your supply chain has the human rights issues and it has the environmental issues, for example. So it's this movement from the shareholder capitalism mindset to the stakeholder capitalism mindset, where stakeholders include all of those people who are affected by the decisions that a company makes. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's only the boardroom guys. So Scott and Tim have to make it popular for the general public.
Exactly.
If they allow me to not report in US GAAP, I'm going to do it. But in the US, that's just not going to happen. I'm sorry to say so. I'm sorry. It's not about us to change it.
But most companies are international. It's not
Well,
as though, yeah.
Let's move this on to another, because that's a whole topic on itself. And there's the lady.
I got a new topic.
Oh, fun. Yay.
So my question is, I'm an attorney. I come at this from the legal angle. My question is, how do you think AI, in particular generative AI, is going to affect or change ownership models and laws?
Scott.
Well, I mentioned something about intellectual property. Again, I'm just applying it to my business. Again, Levi's used these AI-generated models not long ago. There's a company called, I believe it's called LalaLand.ai. You know, again, who do these body parts belong to? I think it's all going to revert back to, there's going to be, people have to be accountable. If they're stealing, you know, someone's nose and eyes and hair, like, people have to be compensated. I think about the writer's strike, and I'm thinking about, again, CA is striking deals with companies to use AI likenesses of their actors. How do people get compensated for their likeness? I think it's really important that any talent, if they're being used in ads and commercials and content, that they're all compensated. So I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but I think there's a lot of intricacies here that we're going to get into. It's a whole new world, so we're all trying to figure out and figure out what works.
I think if I may jump in here, I think there's a huge opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, we are, using a dirty word here, very much in the blockchain space. And blockchain in combination with AI, for me, is a huge opportunity to solve many of these problems. If you create IP, whatever kind it is, and you attach it to the blockchain and associate an owner with it, you know where this is coming from. And then you can use AI and validate this in no time when some of these items pop up anywhere left and right, what the source was, what is the origination of that source, of that IP, and who it belongs to. And then also using blockchain mechanisms, this can be compensated even through, nobody needs to be involved here. It can all be on chain, and everything can be handled for the IP holders, and everybody can be happy that their likeness was actually be compensated for just popping up in some picture that was generated by DALL-E, right? So, and similarly to the legal environment there. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done to organize this properly, but I'm looking very positively in the future.
And again, there's like all these AI books that are popping up on Amazon now, and the writers are then suing Amazon to figure out, they feel their work has been plagiarized. We're just getting, it's just the tip of everything. And so I think, as we get into it, we'll figure out, there's going to be a lot of discussions about rights and copyright infringements, but people should be compensated if you sound like The Weeknd, then pay The Weeknd, right, or whoever it may be. So.
One other thing is that it might increase the volume of litigation activities. So early.
It already is.
Earlier today, I was at an insurance conference. Actually, it was not nearly as interesting as this. But the tech-enabled AI algorithms are really creating these huge amounts of volume for the litigation cases coming in, especially around climate-imposed real estate laws. So yeah, I think that, as you already know, the volume of legal disputes will swell.
The problem is the domino effect, right? So let's presume you own music rights or writer's rights on anything. The moment anyone so the problem is the domino effect of ownership rights. Once you put it into AI, it's not reverse engineerable anymore. Right? That's the main problem, because you never can replicate the same output out of AI that you had the minute before putting in the same text. So you can enforce it once, you can litigate it once. After that, it's going to live on forever with all the brain power you put into the initial version of it. So it's a momentary issue. In 10 years, problem solved, because you're only going to have alliterations of what was put in this decade. So a lot of work now for lawyers, probably much less work in the future for lawyers, because again, everybody's happily uploading stuff into things that are owned by Microsoft already and owned by Elon and whatnot. It's going to hit us hard, I think. IP is going to be the main issue where government would have to have an opinion. And we know they're desperately slow because they don't use technology for anything. So that's my main worry, being European and really caring about data security and my identity and IP. I don't see that's going to happen, because most of this movement comes out of the US. The US usually gets a nice class action afterwards, and the $300 trillion business gets a $6 billion fine. They say, I don't care, I'm gonna pay it, and then everybody's quiet again. Like that's how the US works. And I'm not I live here, so I'm a fan, but at the same time, I'm very worried about that. So I think everybody who's trying to fight their right now, I wrote a children book in 1990, sorry, but that's gonna be gone. Like, that's not your IP anymore in the future, because nobody can enforce it. It's not enforceable anymore.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting times. A very good question. We have time for one more question. I apologize. Gentleman over there.
Yeah, I guess it's a good segue just to kind of pencil in on the topic of authenticity, right? And IP protection as a creator or entrepreneur that, like me, and many of you may be, I think it's easy to talk about, IP infringement in the abstract, but when you've spent, years of your work, in silence building something out, to all of a sudden then see that be replicated without attribution, it is one of those things that keeps, I think, entrepreneurs like myself up at night. So, what are the safeguards that we're thinking of? That's kind of like the first part of the question, around making sure that we have an ecosystem that rewards people that are building for the long term, when copying is that much more easy and misinformation is that much more easy to spread. And the second part of it would be around, like, since so much of it depends on data sets, and not to go back to the FTC action from yesterday, but the biggest data sets in the world are owned by the Microsofts and the Googles of the world. What makes us think that the AI world will be more democratized than the world that came before it?
Well, your main problem, do you employ people? You employ people, I guess, as an entrepreneur, right? You employ someone.
Tim, can you speak up? I think that mic is
I'm
quieter
trying.
than this one.
So I guess you have people working for you.
Correct.
Right?
I mean,
Since some people are great and some are not so much, so you're going to let go of someone who doesn't perform, right? So they're going to upload whatever code you create into AI, and it's gone. It's not yours anymore, right? That's the problem. The problem is we have to go back to creating tangible assets. We are used as a society of building a software, something that's intangible. I do the same with my company, right? I have only intangible assets. Society has to go back to build tangible assets. And a piece of code is not a tangible asset then anymore, because any of your employees can leave tomorrow, take your code, put it into ChatGPT, and you don't own it anymore. That's the problem we are facing. So we have to start thinking as entrepreneurs into going back into tangible assets. That's just my 5 cents. Yeah, we already had open source, but it's a decision by your company as a CEO, like, I'm going to go open source, right? It's not the decision of a single employee. But now you write a specific, like, this as a lawyer, right? That you can protect certain patterns. Can you really protect a piece of code? Already not. So now, like, tech companies in the last years, and I was probably investor in some of them, right? They got their valuations because they wrote some code that was special and they created a product that was special. you're going to be very much exposed to that with your company. But like, you can't really protect a digital product anymore, really, right? And it's going to get worse because AI is going to be able to program it. But it's also liberating because now valuations are not held by a single CEO anymore who creates a product. I'm in that situation. I hold a product. I'm a barrier. Access for all my employees to be successful, probably because I want to make more money than them, right? Technically in capitalism. So the point is, it liberates, right? You can, I don't code anymore for probably 30 years, but I could write a piece of code now that I could have never written 5 years ago. So it's liberating as well. But as a CEO, the question is correct. How do I protect my assets? So we have to create tangible assets again. That's my point.
Then again, every entrepreneur, we found whatever influences we have in the world, social, like whatever, it becomes our own. We internalize it, and we see the world through our eyes, and we see that gap, and we see a world that doesn't exist and start building it. So yes, AI can give you, make it work in terms of search for things. It can be a good administrator, but it's not a good leader.
It's not an architect. Right.
Yeah, so this brings me to the conclusion, which it is complicated, right? I think we can all agree that this topic, we knew already when we get into this topic that this will be a back and forth on multiple different avenues and different levels. So that's why we do these panel talks. We really want to break down the issues. This one was more related to fashion. We went in many different directions here also, discussing life itself and also the value of capitalism and so forth. But I really appreciate that we could highlight some of the elements which were going back to human values and really respecting the others around us and concentrating ourselves, also creating a good society, because now we are reminded if we don't, it might screw us and we might get really the short end of the stick in the long run. At the same time, there is opportunity for companies to really get into new technologies, for individuals, learn about what is out there now and what will come in the future, and really stand out against the competition and really keep these new developments in mind if you're creating IP, if you're a model on a runway, if you are creating environments and entertainment pieces that might be copied by somebody else. What are the means available to you to make this actually stand out and also be defendable? And so in the last part here, really using technologies like AI, blockchain, etc., also to help us create a more sustainable supply chain, create more accountability in now fashion, but in all the other industries together itself. I thank you very, very much for all of you to come here tonight and be part of the Game Changers Collective series, our panel series that we do on a regular basis. The next one will be on October 26th, and it will be about AI and the advertising industry in total and from multiple different aspects here. Before I close and ask you to really show a lot of love to these panelists, I want to just close with one plug-in with a topic that's very passionate, part of mine. Coming from Germany and also living here now, I've been living here now for the last 12 years, and the times that we are living in, all of you who are eligible to vote, I would like to encourage you to go out, register, and be on top of the process that's happening now in this country. Go out and vote, and I say this loud, and I need somebody to convince me otherwise. There's nothing in this world, in a developed country, that affects your life more than politics. So be informed, get out there, register, and vote. This has nothing to do with the panel. This is all me. So that is just a little note to myself. On that note, thank you very much, Scott, Stephanie, Tim. This was fantastic. Thank all of you for coming out here tonight. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon. And then have fun tonight, party, get to the bar, meet, mingle, do whatever you want to do. Love. Thank you so much. This was great. Thank you. I would love to take a picture.